know less of Africa's distant past than almost anywhere else on Earth. But the history of this continent is as important and valuable as any other. In this series, I'm exploring some of the richest and most vibrant histories in the world. And I've come to Ghana in West Africa to explore the Kingdom of ASANTI. It's just one of the continent's many historic and often overlooked kingdoms. ASANTI was among the most impressive. It was found deep in the tropical forest, which raises some questions. How did a sophisticated society emerge from some of the toughest conditions on the planet? How was the ASANTI kingdom created? And what happened to it? Kumasi, Ghana's second city. Today it's home to 1.5 million people. In the 18th and 19th centuries, Kumasi was the center of power of the ASANTI kingdom. A British visitor named Thomas Bowditch came here in 1817. He wrote a remarkable account of the royal court he encountered. The king, his tributaries and captains were resplendent in the distance, surrounded by attendants of every description. At least 100 umbrellas or canopies, which could shelter 30 persons, were sprung up and down by the bearers with brilliant effect, being made of the most showy cloths and silks, and crowned on top with crescents, pelicans, elephants, barrels, and arms and swords of gold. Wow, it sounds quite something.
Yes, and if there's a pictorial depiction of this scene in this book itself, so I could show that to you. And
historian Mary Owusu is an expert in the ASANTI kingdom.
Oh. Here it is. Luckily, it's in color, you know.
It's truly spectacular. And when one talks about kings and courts, you have a kind of certain idea of the extravagance and bright cloths and everything, and this fulfills all of that. And you can see, is this figure here?
That would be the ASANTI, the king.
Yes.
You see, and he has a lot more gold. The people. Something you're seeing but not seeing properly.
Well, interesting.
See these people here?
Yes.
They're holding skulls, human skulls, skulls of important individuals who have been overpowered to show how much control the king had.
This illustration shows a wealthy state with an uncompromising grip on the kingdom. Fascinating though the account is, Bowditch only really got a snapshot of the ASANTI. And it doesn't reflect one of the most remarkable things about this kingdom, how it came into being in the first place. ASANTI emerged a little over 300 years ago in territory now occupied by the Republic of Ghana, in the heart of West Africa's forest zone. Dense forest is an unusual place for large civilizations to establish. The heat and humidity are relentless. Despite the conditions, a complex and sophisticated kingdom emerged that dominated a vast area for more than 200 years. The vegetation seems so impenetrable that the scale of the achievement is hard to comprehend. Discovering how they did it and where they started has preoccupied historians for decades. In 2010, archaeology carried out by the University of Ghana made some important new discoveries about ancient life in this part of Africa.
These are 5 clay figurines we recovered from a site in Rotterdam, dating to the 9th and 10th centuries.
Benjamin Campion and his colleagues found some 80 terracotta figures, perhaps 1,000 years old, in savannah north of the forest, depicting animals and humans. He believes they were part of a shrine.
What this points to is a very complex culture. I mean, even if you look at these as depictions of the world that surrounded the people, that you can see that they're wearing jewelry, body adornment.
Exactly.
That this is obviously a very, very complex culture.
Yeah, for sure. As far as we know, one of the markers of civilized society are ritual complexity, possibly marked by these artistic figures, quality ones as well.
The figurines indicate sophistication among the peoples who lived in this region of West Africa. But so far, archaeologists haven't proven any link between these objects and Asante. In fact, conclusive evidence has yet to be found of the precise origins of the Asante people, for good reason.
It's challenging for archaeologists looking for ancient sites in this thick vegetation that thrives in heat and humidity. They simply don't know where the early Asante came from.
The forest has yet to give up the physical evidence that might reveal what happened many centuries ago. Asante's history isn't as elusive as it might seem, however. Evidence does exist, but it appears in different forms, which are still incredibly valuable.
Narrative, oral history, stories of the past, they're all important here. And knowing why is essentially in understanding how the Asante kingdom came about and what held it together.
These people are heading to the most hallowed spot in Asante territory. This is oral history in action. Their destination is a sacred site within a forest called Asante Manso, where a seldom held ceremony is taking place. It celebrates the 7 clans who first established communities in the forest, but in so doing, laid the foundations of the Asante kingdom. According to legend, they emerged from holes in the ground within the forest. Sacrifice emphasizes the significance and rarity of the ritual. I may find it uncomfortable viewing, but it's an important part of the ceremony of celebrating the origin of the Asante people.
It doesn't really matter whether we believe that the Asante came from a hole in the ground or not. These myths are every bit as important today as they ever were.
Many things decay in the heat and humidity of the forest, but folk memory lasts. Archaeologists can't be certain that Asante's ancestors came from exactly this spot, but the belief in forest origins does chime with what historians have established. The ancestors of Asante were Akan people. The Akan, but 300 years later, a sophisticated man went through a significant and rapid community could establish itself in one account. The forest.
Just unbelievable. If you think the original Asante, that they cleared this forest, trees of that size, by hand.
During the peak of the forest clearance 500 years ago, the Akan used axes to weaken the trunk and then pulled the trees down with twine.
Clearing the forest was a vital precondition for settled society. Before that, Akan people were part of a hunter-gatherer society. With the forest cleared, agriculture could happen.
Only with the space to cultivate land and grow food crops could groups of Akan people expand their populations. Today, in a forest in the west of Ghana, machinery makes short work of ancient trees. Hardwood timber, such as mahogany and teak, is among Ghana's most important exports. Licensing regulations attempt to protect the environment, but there's an understanding among forestry workers that Ghana's history is worth safeguarding too.
The forest is important to the people, to the Akan. The forests are important, are they?
Yes, it means something to the people. We have some areas we don't enter. You name the place, maybe this is the place where Asante people come from. Yes. So the forest is very important to us.
For the Akan people in the 15th and 16th centuries, forest clearance was mind-boggling work. Researchers have calculated that for one man to clear 1 hectare, it would take him 500 days to remove more than 1,200 tons of vegetation. And since the fertility of the soil deteriorates so quickly, he would have to rotate his crops, meaning he would need to clear 6 hectares to feed his family.
Faced with such an enormous task, the Akan people needed additional labor. There weren't enough of their own people to do the job, so they used slaves.
An expert in the early Akan societies that were the foundation of the ASANTI kingdom, Dr. Wilhelmina Donko.
Yes, I mean, importing people from outside was a really useful venture for them. Traders from outside coming in. At different times, they must have brought in people even from possibly as far afield as maybe Nigeria, the Segambian areas, and so on.
How did this early kind of slavery differ from transatlantic slavery, which comes slightly later?
The system that operated here was quite different in the sense that unfree people or people of unfree descent could marry, have offspring, accumulate property, and all that. And sometimes they could even marry into the lineages of their masters or the people who had initially. So it wasn't very hostile. It did not of those who had lost their freedom, but still it's a loss of freedom in the sense that you were removed from your own kinsmen to join a different set of people.
With the help of unfree labor, the Akan made clearances in the forest on an unprecedented scale. For the first time, the forest was a viable place to have organized settled societies. It was still 200 or 300 years before the ASANTI kingdom, but this achievement had a long-lasting effect.
The act of clearing the forest shaped Akan identity. There was a great sense of pride that this effort against the forest had been successful, but that only drew imperative to do more.
Farmers settled in the cleared areas and grew crops needed to support an expanding population. Today, cultivation still happens among the dense undergrowth.
And can you tell me what sort of produce do you farm here?
Yeah, I do produce this type of fruit, which is plantain.
Yeah.
I planted this and it takes 1 year to harvest. This is called cocoyam, and I planted cocoyam.
It's like a potato, it's a starchy.
Yeah, it's starchy like potato.
How do you keep back all of the weeds and the big trees that seem to be growing so voraciously on the edge of your farm?
We use this cutlass. So all of them will come once and weed everything.
Having cleared space for agriculture, the ancestors of ASANTI were determined to make the most of it. The pursuit of abundance quickly became ingrained in the Akan psyche.
The productiveness of the forest required a lot of hard work, much of it carried out by slaves. But none of that could have happened without a commodity that the Akan exchanged for slaves in the first place.
Still found deep within the forest is the precious resource that paid for labor and transformed the Akan people. I'm on my way to one of the 10 largest gold mines in the world. This is the Awasi gold mine. Today, gold-bearing rock is extracted from shafts that reach 1,500 meters underground. A chemical process separates and smelting results in gold bullion. At today's price has been extracted from here since the end of the 20th century. But it's been mined in this region for a lot longer than that.
No one now knows when the Akan people discovered gold, but it is clear that they were mining it when they were clearing up in the 15th century.
In those days, the gold was found much nearer the surface, and it was smelted by the Akan using Iron Age technology. The precious resource was critical to the transformation of the forest and to the foundations of the ASANTI kingdom. And gold provided by the forest gave the people a significant place in a much wider economy. Akan gold found its way to North Africa and beyond via trans-Saharan trade routes. And gold paid for not just slaves, but textiles, brass, copper, and salt. From the 1470s, Akan gold had a direct route to Europe via Portuguese merchants on the coast. In exchange for gold, they sold guns. A map made by a merchant in the 16th century shows who the Portuguese were dealing with. The most successful Akan were amassing power. The developing entrepreneurial spirit would have a major impact on
The Akan have something in common.
one old school wooden stool. The village of Awir is a centre of stool craftsmanship. Every stool is carved from a single piece of sese wood. The finest stools made here are used by senior figures in Ghanaian society. Less ornate stools are for everyday use and tourist souvenirs. According to leading Asante scholar